I'm scared. I am a horror and thriller reader generally, but I always do want to try new things because what if I end up really loving something? I don't want to say that I won't read anything because my taste could change. And I figured now is a good time to test some things out because the Goodreads Choice Awards are currently happening. I thought that I would pick one book from 3 different categories outside of my comfort zone and read it. These are generally the most popular books that are out right now in these categories. So I figured that picking from these lists would give me a higher chance of liking them. The 3 categories I'm going to be reading are fantasy, romance, and romantasy. Romance is the least out of my comfort zone. I do read a few every year, but it's never something I reach for. I only pick up ones that my friend Michelle tells me I'm going to like. So really, even though I have read a few, it's not in my comfort zone at all. So for romance, I will be reading The 7 Year Slip. This is a romance that features time travel. For fantasy, I'm going to be reading The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is a high fantasy that is following a teenager who is picked out of an orphanage to become a spy at an academy. And then for romantasy, I will be reading Fourth Wing. This is following a character who has to go to school to become a dragon rider, even though she does not want to. And she has to try to bond with a dragon to become a rider. All of these books really scare me, specifically these two. But I'm really excited to give things a go that I don't normally read. Maybe it will lead to me reading new favorites. Maybe it will lead to me reading new books that become favorites that are in these genres. So I hope you enjoy this. I will let you know that I don't know how to talk about fantasy books. So please bear with me with that. And I'm going to be starting with Fourth Wing. Would you like to know a plot twist? I think I'm loving this book. I'm shocked, really surprised. I just think it's a lot of fun. There for sure are some cringy moments in here. There's like comments that are made and I'm like, that was a choice. But I'm having such a fun time with it. I am really enjoying the school setting, I think. I think that's probably what is making me like this. I'm enjoying watching our main character Violet progress. I think the like information on the world that we're getting is presented in a good way for someone that doesn't read fantasy. They have these, I forget what they're called, battle briefs or something. Sounds like fancy underwear. So we are learning about things that are happening in little chunks, which is nice. I like Violet as a character. She's clearly not someone that is made for this like cutthroat physical, forget what they're called, section of jobs, because they all have like you can go to different areas. Like you could be a scribe and do like book things, or you could be a rider and like ride dragons and battle and stuff like that. And like she did not want to be a rider. Her mom is like this big commander or something and pretty much forced her to. I'm enjoying the like learning and school stuff and progressing is what I'm enjoying. Hello. And I think it's really interesting. We're watching them like do like this is really hard. How do I talk about things? They're doing like training battles. Like I'm into that. And then I like Violet's friend, Rhiannon. And I don't know what else to say. I don't know how to talk about fantasy books, but I'm liking it. I'm like really into the story. Once again, I do think that there are some incredibly cringy moments that are like funny because they're so cringy and like they're not supposed to be funny. And those I'm like, why? But other than that, I'm having a great time. Honestly, at this point, it is at least 4 stars for me. There is a very high chance that it will become more like combat battle focused and then I will probably start to lose interest, but you never know. So here's the surprise update that I'm sure most people did not expect. Very interested to see how it continues. Right where I ended, about a third in, like things are happening. Something just happened which I expected to happen, but it was still just very interesting to see it happen. I'm a little scared how the book is going to continue to go from here, just like knowing fantasy books. I don't know fantasy books, but like knowing some things about how fantasy books tend to go. I'm really nervous, but we all love a good plot twist, so here was one. I'm 69% into Fourth Wing, which feels very fitting for a book about someone who ends up getting horny because she feels the same things as her dragon and he's horny. Well, that's not what the book is about, but that happens. So when I'm reading this, Iron Flame has just come out, and this, I am shocked that I own this. And I also got this. So who am I truly? Here's the situation. I'm really into the story, but I don't think the writing is good. It's actively taking me out of the story sometimes. So that is not ideal. I'm not someone that is like judging a book by the writing. Like, I don't read for literary merit, you know? But this is taking me out of the story sometimes. But the story itself, I'm just like really into it for some reason. It is full of tropes. There's a character that reminds me exactly of Gale from the Hunger Games, but like I'm having a really good time with it. So I don't know how to talk about this. There's the horny dragons. What do I say about this book? I don't know how to talk about fantasy. Oh my god, this is very difficult. They're still like doing things in school. There's like a quest. It's not a quest. I don't know. They like had to do something as a group, like a team heist for a grade. So there's like some more battle-y action to things. I'm really sorry to anyone that reads fantasy and is cringing so hard at me trying to speak about this. I'm really disliking the Gale character because, you know, if you know anything about Gale, there's some like funny things that are happening. It should not be funny, but it's funny to me, and I think that's just because it's cringy and I'm just like laughing about it. But once again, I'm fully invested. When I'm reading it, I'm like super into it, other than like the moments that I've taken out of the story. I feel like I'm just complaining about this book, but like, I don't know, there's just something like addicting about it. I'm going back and forth between listening to the audiobook and reading it with my eyeballs, and I do actually prefer reading it with my eyeballs. I don't like the narrator's choice with Zayden and Tarn. I don't know how to say any names in fantasy books. This is really hard. Fantasy booktubers, do you just like know how to pronounce these things when you talk about them? Do you look it up? Do you just make things up? Like, I have so many questions. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I am liking it. We just got to a high action seeming scene. Like, I just got to the start of it and I paused. Don't know how I feel about that yet, because anytime there's been more high action sequences, I think I zone out a little bit, which is like weird because I don't dislike that. I think because it's not like just like reading about how someone's sword moved and stuff that is like really boring in battle scenes. In the few that I've read, I have read like 3 battle scenes, and they're not even really in this book. But the more high action stuff is not my favorite, which does scare me a little bit. But also, I feel like this is gonna get at least 4 stars. I don't think it can be 5, but I think it's gonna be 4 to 4.5 stars, depending on how it continues to go, which like is a huge success for me. Like, I can't believe I own this or this. There's bonus content in this. It's like 2 chapters from Zayden's perspective, which I'm kind of scared about. I'm very curious what chapters they are. Okay, they're not like 2 chapters in a row. Have I read them already? Yeah, so I could read those now. I'm reading it. It's going well, and I'll talk to you when I'm done. I am a Fourth Wing fan. I really ended up loving this. There was a moment where I was like crying in the club, you know, and by the club I mean the grocery store parking lot. Because there's a thing towards the end. Oh, I was even spoiled for it, and I was not ready. I am gonna give this 4.5 stars. The half star coming off is because there were too many like really cringy moments and like some writing issues for me. But I'm so glad that I picked this up. It kind of like ignited this like not love of reading. This is so weird. It just like gave me the vibes of whenever I was in high school and like was reading The Hunger Games because the movie was coming out, and reading Divergent and just like loving those kinds of stories. This just really like made me feel like that again. Specifically Divergent, just because there's a lot of like training and stuff and like different like roles in society that these people are taking on. And like in Divergent there's the different like factions and they have to learn all this stuff. I should reread Divergent. Anyway, so this is one that I can see myself rereading. This is like a 500-page book. The audiobook for it is like 22 hours, which normally, like, if a book is that long, count me out. So I do have regrets about not getting the initial sprayed edge copy because this is not as cool. I almost said black. The red and gold on here is pretty, but like that's not as exciting as like a stenciled edge would have been. I don't know what the original like end pages look like, but there's that because this is the like holiday edition. The back looks the same. This does have 2 bonus chapters, which I will say do not read them until the very, very end, because I was like, oh, I've already read chapter 9, so I can read chapter 9 in the bonus content because it's from the male, like, the love interest's perspective. Don't do it. I spoiled myself on the very end, which was not ideal. I mean, it wasn't a big deal, but you know, didn't really want to do that. But yes, I have Iron Flame. I will be reading it. I didn't love the audiobook. I wouldn't say not to read it, but I think that I kind of preferred reading this physically. I just don't know who I am as a person anymore. Like, me liking a book that is this long, me liking a fantasy book. And like I liked the fantasy more than the romance for sure. This did have really good banter in it. I did like that. I was finding myself like hiding so that no one, Adam, couldn't see me like giggling. I'm embarrassed to say that, but you know, it's the truth. I mean, if you ever thought I lied about my opinions on books before, I would not lie to say that on the internet. So I don't think this was a perfect book, but I had such a good time with it. It was really easy to read, really easy to get into. I always wanted to get back to it. I thought it was really interesting. I loved the dragons. They can like communicate in their minds, so you like get the dragons like thoughts and stuff sometimes. So good. So I don't know if this was a plot twist for anyone but me, but I really did love this. So I'm on to my romance pick, and I am, I believe, around 40% into the 7-year slip. So far I am enjoying this one, but I find that romance doesn't really like hit for me unless there's really good banter. There is some stuff that I'm really liking between our 2 main characters, but I just want them to be a little more sarcastic. Let me back up and tell you what this book is even about. So the 7-year slip, we are following our main character Clementine, and she is a very introverted and organized, like straight-laced, by the books individual. She works in book publishing. I can't remember what the department is, but we know that she is different than she used to be because she has recently lost her aunt, who she was extremely close with. They used to travel together and all this stuff. It was her mom's older sister, and growing up she would spend a lot of time with her aunt, and her aunt would be like, oh, the apartment is magical, and would tell her stories about how like she would go into the apartment and every once in a while she would be in the past, and she had a relationship with the woman who lived there, but like it ended in heartbreak because they couldn't really be together and they wanted slightly different things. And then with like the timing of everything and not being together at all times, like it ended up not working out. So then when her aunt dies, Clementine inherits the apartment, and her aunt told her that like she always found herself with, I don't remember what her name is, like whenever they were both at crossroads in their lives, so when they like really needed each other. And she just finds out some news at work, so then Clementine goes into the apartment where she lives, and she wakes up and there's this random man in the apartment. I think his name is Elon. He is from North Carolina. She lives in New York City, which makes sense. That's where all publishing stuff is. So he is there because he wants to be a chef. And at first she like freaks out and kicks him out and all this stuff. Then she ends up letting him stay, and they are slowly starting to get to know each other. The time travel situation is always 7 years. It's either back or forward. So she knows she's 7 years in the past. He does not know her. He doesn't know about the time traveling thing, but this is not a permanent situation. So we know that, she knows that, and then we are witnessing that happening. I like our main character. I like how she is like the pretty typical like type A, wants to work a lot personality, but it is because of her and her grief. It's not that she's always been like this. So it's interesting to explore stuff with that. I think at this moment it is feeling like 4 stars. I think this is easiest for me to predict with romance because romance out of this video is the thing I'm most comfortable with. I don't read that many romance books. I think I've read 5 total this year out of like 230 something. So really, it's not something I ever prioritize, but this one really intrigued me with the time travel stuff. So where I am now, she's in her present day. And she's trying to figure out if she can like contact Elon in any way. I'm looking forward to seeing more of them together. I really like them together, but I feel like the moments when she is just existing and trying to deal with things aren't quite my favorite because I just don't think they're as interesting. But I'm looking forward to continuing. I really like this added little element of it. With the time travel that's happening, it just adds something extra and fun to it, which I'm liking because it's interesting, but also it is keeping the characters from being together for the whole book. So I don't know if that's hindering my enjoyment at all. So I'm enjoying their relationship, but I want more from it, but it's also not an all-time favorite of mine. Like usually if I'm going to really like a romance, I feel like by this point I'm already invested in their relationship, and I'm not at this point, and that's just because we don't have all of their time together. But I am looking forward to reading more. I'm 69% into the 7-year slip, and I'm enjoying this a lot more than I was at the beginning. Not that I wasn't enjoying it, but we are just getting more of Clementine. I was saying Elon, it's Ewan. I am just listening to the audiobook and my brain just like said Elon, but then I was looking at some reviews and it's Iwan. So that's my bad. This is so hard because I feel like in romance you can't really spoil things, but there's this like time travel-ish element to it. So I don't want to spoil that stuff, but we do get more interactions with Clementine and Ewan. There's plotline with her publisher stuff that influences things that lead to other things. Wow, A+ commentary from me. But I do enjoy seeing our two characters together more. That really has been my biggest complaint the whole time. I like the writing. I do like the interactions we're getting between our two characters. I still do want more, and I'm really interested to see how things play out because Ewan does have the knowledge of her in his future, but it is her past. So there's that like discussion of like, why would he not try to find her after they have met? So like, did something happen between them in the times that she goes in the past? Like, does she tell him about what's going on, or like all of this stuff? So that's a really interesting added element to it. He is a cook, so it's really fun to see his like passion for that because he's really passionate about what he does, but she is slowly not. And she used to be, but she's not so much more now. So I feel like that's going to be a discussion. And like, I was just having such a good time with it. I read this from like midnight to 1 a.m. last night. And I was like, I need to stop so I can like talk to you guys, but also it's 1 a.m. so I should go to bed. So I'm for sure going to be able to finish it today, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I have finished the 7-year slip, and I think I'm going to give this 4 stars. I think that it was written really well. I enjoyed that aspect of it. But something that I kind of realized while reading this is that if I'm going to read a romance, I generally want it to be just romance and not as much real life stuff. This centered a lot around grief, and I feel like that was the main focus instead of the romance. I really liked them as a couple, but I still feel like the main part of this was her finding herself and things like that after dealing with grief. And I think it was done well, and I think that it had a lot of like important discussions in it. But after reading Fourth Wing, it was easier for me to pinpoint that like the romance that doesn't work for me usually is not as romance focused, because in Fourth Wing, when it wasn't focusing on the romance, it was focusing on other things that are still not real life. And a lot of times in romance, when it's not the romance that is being focused on, it's like real life problems. And I don't like to read about those. Like, they're fine, but my favorite books have those discussions in it, but from another angle. So, like, I mean, I primarily read horror and thrillers, and there are a lot of like real life discussions in it, but it centers around this like thing happening, not just like life happening and then a romance. I don't know if that makes any sense. I really liked a lot of stuff in here. I just wish that the romance was more so the forefront of the story. I feel like I need it to be like 90% of the romance if it is not going to be not specifically real life things happening. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it does not, but it's something I kind of realized while thinking about this book. This is probably not groundbreaking information. This one was fun, but also sad. There was some like really heartbreaking moments in here. It does deal with grief, losing someone that you're really close to because of suicide and the thoughts that can come with that. Once again, I think this was done really well. I liked the time travel stuff in it. I don't know. I wish that the time travel was a little bit more of the focus, or the relationship was a little more of the focus. Really, I wish it was more of the relationship, I think. But overall, I still did really enjoy it. I have not read The Dead Romantics. I would be interested in reading it, but generally, romance is just like not something that I'm going to like go out of my way to read. But I am glad that I picked this one up. So that is The 7-Year Slip, and I am terrified for the next book. I have started The Will of the Many. This was the scariest book for me to read for this video because this is just fantasy. It's epic, I think, high fantasy, which is not something that I ever read, but I've made it 216 pages in. I am at part 2 and I am surviving. So please bear with me because I am learning how to talk about fantasy. I don't read this genre, so I will try my best. So this is following Viz, and he was orphaned after a tragic accident 3 years ago. He was part of this big family and ended up becoming pretty much a nobody. Like, I think he wasn't supposed to survive, but he ended up, I think, being homeless for a little bit, and then he found his way to an orphanage because he was starving. So he hates the system, which, you know, and in this, they have, I guess it's magic, and it is called the will. And it's pretty much your, I guess, mental strength, like your will. That's what it is, you know? But they have this, I think it's called seeding. So they're like giving their will to higher up people. There's this whole ranking system with that, and he hates that. He's like, I will never do this. I will never give my will to somebody. I will never take somebody's will. And he's very adamant about that. And then he gets adopted by this other high up guy who wants to use him to spy at this academy, like a school, to get information. He has been sent to the academy to find answers, to solve a murder, to search for an ancient weapon, to uncover secrets that may tear the Republic apart. Yeah, so the Empire executed his family, and he has to rise through the Academy's ranks. But if the hierarchy finds out who he truly is, they will kill him. So he has changed his name. Nobody knows who he is, so the person that has adopted him knows like a false backstory. We are slowly learning information about this world and this system because our main character does know a decent amount of things. He's very educated, and we are learning things just from people talking to him. We are in his head the whole time. It's in first person, which I am thankful for. I feel like that is helping me understand the story more. There are certain things that he already knows, so we just have to pick up on it, kind of like the will system and all of that. But there are things he doesn't know because he has not been in the system for the past 3 years. So some things are happening and we are learning about them with him, which I think is working for me. We have not gotten to the school part yet, which is why Cassidy and Mel recommended this to me, but part 2 starts at the school. So far I'm interested. I feel like it is paced well. It is 216 pages in, and the books I read are typically 350 pages. Things have been moving at a good pace to keep my attention. There has not been a time where I've been really bored. There's been some high action things, and it's been very interesting. I'm not feeling any sort of way about it. Well, I mean, I am generally positive emotions, but there is no obsession so far. I am enjoying the characters. I like our main character, and then there's a character that he is training with, and I really like her. I don't know if we're gonna get any more of her, but I'm interested enough to continue reading, and I am enjoying my time, which is good because I was really scared that I was not gonna understand anything and that it was gonna all go over my head, and I just like wouldn't be able to process what is happening. I am listening to the audiobook, which I think is helpful. So far so good. Let's hope it continues to be that way. I have made it to part 3 of The Will of the Many, which is 436 pages in. The first part of this felt like it went by significantly faster. They're pretty evenly spaced. So I've been reading this today. I just got a shower in the afternoon. So the first third was all read before like 1 o'clock, and now it is midnight and I just got through part 2. And I don't know. So I think my main issue is that I don't really care about the characters. I do to an extent, but like I don't care about them. And I feel like there's not a lot going on. I mean, there is. So we are watching Vis climb the ranks of his classes. There's like different levels and you can move up to different versions, like the smarter and more capable whatever students. And like he's really the only one that is like actively doing this. And then he's trying to figure out this little bit of a mystery, but that really hasn't come into play for a lot of this. It was like a chunk, and then they have not really talked about it since then. There was a like plot twist that happened, but I was like, wait, if I would know people's names, that would be helpful. Like I know who they are like when they are in the story, but some like other people, like side characters and stuff, I don't know why I'm not loving the characters, but I feel like for me to love this, I would need to be more invested in the characters. There are moments that I really like, and I do like seeing Vis's relationship with different people that he's going to school with, but for me it's just missing something, which is really sad. I am liking it enough to continue, but it is one that I could put down, and like if I didn't pick it back up I would be fine. Not that I want to, but like I could. So this is like my test into epic high fantasy, and I feel like I was concerned that I would feel too dumb. I don't feel that way. Oh, I think a lot of the reason that I'm having issues with the character is that we're supposed to be following a 17-year-old, but he feels so old. Part of it I think is because the narrator is an older British man, but also like as a character himself, he just feels significantly older than 17. I just don't believe it. I don't know if this was set in a school setting for the hype of school settings. I also don't really care about anything that is happening in the school setting. So like in Fourth Wing, they were doing things that I felt applied to other things they were doing. So there was not the Fourth Wing is, but I think that things were keeping my attention because I knew it was related to other things. And I feel like a lot of the school stuff just is really boring to me. So those are my thoughts 2/3 in. Hopefully it gets a little better for me. We'll see. So I have finished The Will of the Many, and I need to go back and reread some things. So I'm going to give you my thoughts now. Then I'm going to reread a little bit. I'm not sure how much yet. I'll give you my final thoughts and wrap up the video. So part 3, so good. By far my favorite part of the book, and it really brought the book up in rating for me. So the last part is very action-packed. It is like everything coming together from all of the sleuthing and learning and all of this stuff that happens in the first 2 parts. There's this big like event test thing that happens at the end, and that's a lot of what this is, but we are also following some other stuff that is happening because of the school and his classes. But like, I can't really talk about a lot of details. The ending, that's what I have to say. Those are my thoughts. So I will be reading the second book. Whenever it comes out, I might do a reread of this. One, I feel like I'm gonna need it. Two, I think that upon reread, I could like it even more. And then I will be like super fresh for the next one because there's a lot of information that will be coming. And I'm scared that if I don't know everything I need to know from this one, I'm going to be really lost. Speaking of being really lost, I did not find that to be the case in this book. So a lot of the reason that I don't tend to pick up fantasy is because I am really scared of world building. I don't picture things when I read. A lot of people will be like visualizing things apparently. When I read, if I'm reading with a physical book, I'm very aware that I'm looking at pages. Like there's nothing going on anywhere else. And then when I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm very aware of the other thing I'm doing, which recently has been diamond painting. I'm working on a snow globe on. How did I get to this? Oh, so I feel like the world itself feels somewhat similar. I mean, it feels kind of old-timey, but like there wasn't anything besides the magic system and like the hierarchy of things. Haha, this is a hierarchy series. Okay, one, I don't exactly know what world building means, probably, because the books that I read are set on Earth. This is not set on Earth. Nothing was like too complex that I didn't understand, and things that were happening in the world itself felt similar enough that like I could reference something in our world that like was a parallel. I did imagine them as like in the past, so not like cities like ours, but you know. Okay, so this is separated into 3 parts. Part 1 would be 3.5 stars. Part 2 is like 2.5 stars. And then part 3 is like 4.5. So if you average that out, it's a little less than 4 stars, but because of my enjoyment for part 3, I am going to give this 4 stars. And I think that upon reread, and if the rest of the series goes well, I think it could end up getting a higher rating in the future. Cassidy was saying that she wouldn't specifically say that this is a fantasy that she would recommend to beginner fantasy readers. So I feel like the fact that I did well understanding things and enjoyed it is a good sign. So 4 stars. My main complaints come from me not reading series really. Hello. Because in a standalone book, you get to know the characters and the situation and see them like doing things for that super early on in the book because there's a full story that there's like nothing at the end. Like there's not going to be a second part. There's no continuation. So everything happens in that story. So the pacing is a lot faster. In this one, it felt a little slow, specifically in part 2. So I kind of had to like change my expectations because in a 350 page story, obviously things are going to be different than in 600 pages in book 1 of, I don't know how many books this is supposed to be. It just says book 1, so I'm not sure. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy. I know his previous work was a trilogy, so really I don't know. So that is hard for me to like, so it's hard for me to like change. Hello. So I have to like remember that whenever I am reading something like this. Like it's just a different reading experience. So there's that. And then my 2 biggest complaints were that I feel like I didn't really feel connected to the characters or their relationships until probably, I don't know, halfway into the book. I started to care in part 2, and then in part 3, like I really did. So I just wish that maybe relationships were formed earlier on to make me more invested in the story. My biggest complaint is that in part 2, we are watching Vis do his schooling. He's trying to advance and like move from the lower classes to the higher classes and all of this stuff. And I feel like we are constantly told that the stuff he's moving to is so much harder and all this stuff, but we're not learning any of the information. Like he was talking about how complex this will system, like the magic system, was compared to his previous class. I'm like, but I don't know anything that you're learning. Like I feel like if I was learning along with him, I would have been more invested, even if it was to the point where like it was so complex that I didn't understand it. At least then I would feel like I was more part of the story instead of observing it, because later on and earlier I felt like I was more included in the story instead of just being an observer like I felt in part 2. There is a really cool aspect of this that is something that takes place in the school that I really enjoyed. It reminded me of another book. Part 3 reminded me somewhat of the Hunger Games with certain aspects. Here's the thing, I don't know what is considered a spoiler and what is not. There's a certain plot line that reminded me of other things I have read and loved, and I think moving forward is something that I will look for when I am trying other fantasy books, because I will be doing that. I think that's all I'm going to say about this until I do a reread of the last couple chapters, just to make sure I really know what's going on. But I'm really glad that I read this. I would have never ever picked this up if it was not for this video, and it's kind of opened some doors. I've been talking to Mel and Cassidy, and they are coming up with different recommendations for me to try based on things that I liked, so there will likely be more fantasy content coming from me. I'm still obviously gonna read horror and thriller books, but if there are other things that I like to read, why would I not read them and talk about them on my channel? So I'm gonna go figure out where I need to start rereading and lay in bed and do that. So I reread the last, I don't know, 50 pages. I did skip around a little bit, and by skip around I mean skip forward, just because I wanted to make sure I was really grasping everything, because there's a lot that happens at the end, and I am glad that I did that. My overall feelings did not change. I still love everything that happened at the end, and I cannot wait to see where it goes because the direction it went in. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I've talked about this one a lot. This video was a huge success. I read Fourth Wing and I gave it 4.5 stars. This ended up being my favorite of the video. I have Iron Flame. I have not read it yet, but I'm very interested in it. And this has me considering reading a bunch of other fantasy romance books that I've previously been like, I don't care about that, because between reading this and The 7-Year Slip, I really realized that I think fantasy romance could work for me even more than like a contemporary rom-com, because I liked when it wasn't focusing on the romance, that the stuff that was happening was like a fantasy plot instead of real world problems, which I don't love to read about in the way that they are done in typical romance books. Extremely glad I read this. I honestly was not planning on it, but it shows me that I do need to pick up books outside of my comfort zone every once in a while. With this, I loved the dragons. I really liked the banter between the main characters with the relationship and her and her friends. Like, this one made me so emotional. I thought that it was really interesting to learn about this world, and I had a great time with it. So The 7-Year Slip, I gave 4 stars. I loved the relationship in here, but sadly we did not get enough of it. The thing about this is I was considering lowering my rating a little bit because it was just too much of the not romance plotline for my personal tastes. I would really only lower it to like a 3.5, 3.75. I think it was done well. I just want my romance books to be a like large majority of the romance being the plot, and seeing them do things together in this one was some moments of them together, which I was obsessed with, and then a lot of seeing them doing separate things, mostly our main character. And it was interesting enough, but I was always wanting us to get back to the romance. I am very glad that I read it though. I will continue to pick up rom-coms, but honestly probably even less now because I'm more interested in trying out things in the romantasy category. And then The Will of the Many, I am going with 4 stars for this, with the potential of this being raised in the future. The thing is that I feel like I overall equally enjoyed The Will of the Many and The 7-Year Slip, but the stuff that I loved in The Will of the Many was like so good. And I think that a lot of the issues come from me not being well versed in this genre and like not knowing what to expect and how to like think about things as they're happening. This sequel is not out yet, but I want to read it as soon as it comes out. I never thought that I would say that. This was the most surprising for me out of all of this, just because I thought that I wouldn't be able to like grasp it very well, but that was not the case. I'm interested in trying other fantasy books. I have talked to Mel and Cassidy, and they have started recommending me books to kind of help me figure out my taste in fantasy, which is just nuts that that is even like a conversation that is happening. But I ended up really loving where this story went and what it was doing and what it was setting up, and just I'm so excited. So I should read more books out of my comfort zone, specifically in the romantasy and the fantasy genres. My ranking is Fourth Wing, The Will of the Many, and then 7 Year Slip, but I did really enjoy everything that I read, which is extremely exciting. So if you have any recommendations in any of these 3 categories, please let me know. For both romance and romantasy, I tend to like things that have a lot of banter. Like, I don't want everything to be too sweet. I think because of that, I usually like enemies to lovers, and I do like fake dating. With fantasy stuff, anything related to anything in the Hunger Games is something I'm into. I really liked the like dragons and how they worked in this. I think I really like trials. I'm still open to school settings because one of these worked, and one, the reason I didn't like it more was because of the school setting. But yeah, I'm really open to anything, so let me know your favorites that fit in with those, or if you think that you have a really good suggestion outside of those things, I'm so willing to try. I hope you enjoyed this video. I had so much fun with it. It was such a success that I was not expecting. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these 3 books and what you thought of them. If you have made it to the end and want to leave me an emoji to say you were here, you can leave me a dragon emoji for Fourth Wing. Keep an eye out because there will be more Goodreads videos coming from me. If you're looking to find me in other places on the internet, everything is linked in the description, including my Bookstagram, my Storygraph, and my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye!